Alina sat quietly in the passenger seat as her husband Daniel drove them home from another dull dinner with his coworkers. She stared out the window at the fading lights of their small Illinois town, wondering when her life had begun to feel so small. The car was filled with silence, the kind that had become normal between them. Daniel didn't ask how she felt. He never did anymore. At 41, Alina should have felt secure she had a decent career, a stable home, a marriage of 15 years. But instead, she felt invisible. It wasn't one moment that broke her. It was years of being slowly forgotten. At work, she was overlooked, talked over, even though she was the one who kept things running smoothly. At home, she had become background noise. She used to dream bigger. She had once been the woman who traveled alone, painted late into the night, and made friends everywhere. Now she just folded laundry in silence, managed spreadsheets. I told herself it was fine. It wasn't fine. 2 weeks ago, she applied for a senior position at her logistics company. It was a role she had been working toward for years. She put in long hours, refined her pitch, and poured everything she had into the proposal. Her team told her she was perfect for it. Even her manager gave her an encouraging nod before the final interview. She allowed herself to hope just a little. Then came the meeting. They gave the position to Brian. He was 10 years younger, louder in meetings, and always knew how to charm the higher-ups. Alina had helped him more times than she could count. She'd shared ideas, covered his mistakes, even stayed late to support his team. And now he was the one celebrating. Alina stood in the hallway outside the conference room after the decision, trying to smile while her coworkers offered awkward pats on the back. "You'll get it next time," someone said. But she knew better. There wouldn't be a next time. Something in her had cracked. That evening, she came home to Daniel watching TV with a beer in hand. She slipped off her heels, her feet aching, her heart heavier than usual. They gave the promotion to Brian, she said. Daniel didn't turn away from the screen. "Oh, that sucks. That's all you're going to say." He glanced at her, bored. "I mean, maybe they think he has more energy. You said you've been tired lately." Alina stared at him, stunned. "So you think I'm not good enough either?" "I didn't say that." He shrugged. "Don't take it so personally. It's just work." It was like the air went out of the room. She looked at the man she'd built a life with, the man who once drove hours to see her perform spoken word poetry in college, and realized he didn't see her anymore. Maybe he hadn't in years. That night, Alina didn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Daniel snored beside her. Her chest ached not from sadness, but from something deeper. Something that felt like loss. Not of the promotion. Not even of Daniel. But of herself. She got out of bed and went to the kitchen. The soft glow of the fridge light cast long shadows on the tile floor. She poured a glass of water but didn't drink it. Instead, she pulled out her laptop and opened an old folder labeled Me. Inside were photos from 10, even 15 years ago, her smiling on a solo trip to Spain, dancing barefoot on a beach, painting in a sunlit room, laughing with friends she hadn't seen in years. She didn't look perfect in those photos, but she looked alive. She clicked through them slowly, remembering how she used to feel: bold, curious, hungry for life. Where had that version of her gone? Buried under other people's needs, she thought. Forgotten in a routine that wasn't hers anymore. She opened a blank document and stared at the screen. Then she typed the first sentence without thinking. "This is the beginning of the woman you didn't believe I could be." She stared at the words. Something stirred inside her like embers from a fire long gone cold. She didn't know what she would do next, but she knew she couldn't keep living like this. She wouldn't let herself fade. Not for her job. Not for her husband. Not for anyone. The next morning she got up early, dressed in her sharpest blazer, and did her hair, not for work, not for anyone, but for herself. At the office, she kept her head high. When Brian walked past her desk with his usual fake charm, she smiled politely but didn't shrink. She had nothing to prove to him. She wasn't going to beg for respect anymore. She was going to earn it on her terms or walk away from anything that didn't value her. At home, Daniel barely noticed the difference. He scrolled through his phone during dinner while she quietly observed him. She wasn't angry, not in the usual way. It was something calmer. Something colder. She knew now he had stopped showing up for her a long time ago. And maybe she had let it happen. Maybe she had spent too long trying to keep the peace, to keep the routine alive. Even if it slowly chipped away at her, but not anymore. In the weeks that followed, Alina started to change little things. She signed up for an art class at a local studio. She updated her resume and applied for roles outside the company. She began journaling every night. And slowly, the woman in those old photos didn't seem so far away. Daniel started noticing the changes too. One night he asked, "What's with all the late nights?" "I'm just working on something," she said, not offering more. He laughed a little. "Midlife crisis." She smiled. "No, a midlife awakening." She wasn't doing this to make him jealous. She wasn't doing it to prove anything to Brian or her coworkers or even herself. She was simply tired of pretending to be someone smaller than she really was. And deep down, she knew the time would come when Daniel would finally see her again. But by then, it might be too late. Elena's mornings began earlier now. She woke up before sunrise, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She liked the stillness, the silence before the world stirred. Her coffee tasted better somehow. Her steps felt lighter. She had started running again, not far. Just enough to remind herself that her body was still strong and alive. Her transformation didn't come with loud declarations or dramatic changes. It was quiet, intentional. She started taking care of herself in ways she hadn't in years. She changed her wardrobe, nothing flashy, just pieces that made her feel confident. She started wearing her hair differently. Subtle, but noticeable. And people began to notice. At work, she stopped letting others interrupt her. She spoke clearly in meetings and shared her ideas with confidence. And when Brian tried to take credit for one of her suggestions again, she called it out calmly, firmly. The room went silent, but no one argued. After that, they listened more. She also began applying for new jobs. Not out of desperation, but because she was done waiting to be chosen. She wanted to go where her voice mattered. And for the first time in years, she believed she was worthy of something more. Daniel, on the other hand, was slow to catch on. He still came home, dropped his keys on the counter, scrolled through his phone, and asked the same tired questions. "How was your day?" Without looking up. At first, Alina gave the usual fine, but after a while she stopped answering. She didn't need to anymore. One Friday evening, she came home late from her art class, paint still smudged on her hands. Daniel was waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed. "Where have you been?" he asked. "At class," she said simply. "You didn't say anything." "I didn't know I needed permission." He frowned. "I just thought we'd eat together." Alina looked at him, her tone calm. "You haven't cared about that in years." His face tightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you don't get to ignore me for months and then act surprised when I start living my own life." She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just walked past him, grabbed a glass of water, and went upstairs. That moment marked a shift. Daniel started noticing more after that. The way she laughed during phone calls, how she'd stay out later, how she didn't ask him what he wanted for dinner anymore. She had stopped revolving around him. One weekend, Alina was invited to a local women's business panel as a guest speaker. Someone had seen one of her online articles about workplace respect and asked her to share her story. She hesitated at first, unsure if she was the right person, but then she said yes. She wasn't just healing. She was growing. When she stood on that stage holding the mic, the room quieted. She spoke honestly about being overlooked, about losing herself, and finding the courage to change. She didn't name names or point fingers. She just spoke her truth. After the panel, people lined up to thank her. Some cried. Some asked to collaborate. Alina felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Seen, respected, empowered. That night, she came home glowing. Daniel was on the couch, as usual, watching sports. He looked up and blinked. "You look nice." She smiled, hung up her coat, and sat across from him. "I was on a panel today." spoke about leadership, career resilience. He looked surprised. You really? She raised an eyebrow. Yes, me. He paused. I'm happy for you. But the words felt hollow, like they came too late. Over the next few weeks, Alina kept moving forward. She joined a women's networking group, started mentoring younger professionals, and began freelancing on the side. She was building something new, something her stud Daniel tried, in his own way, to keep up. He'd suggest movie nights, offer to cook, even asked if they could take a trip together. But Alina didn't say yes right away, because she wasn't sure she wanted to go back to what they had. She wasn't the same woman who once waited for his attention. And he wasn't the same man who once earned it one evening. He found her reading in the living room, soft music playing in the background. Can we talk? He asked. She looked up, curious but calm. Sure. He sat down across from her, nervous. I know I've been distant. I know I've taken you for granted, he said. But I miss you, Lena. I want us to fix this. She studied his face. There was a flicker of honesty. There's something real. But it wasn't enough. I'm not the same woman you married, she said softly, and I don't want to go back to who I was. That version of me was lost, small and quiet. I love who I'm becoming now. Daniel looked down. I know, I see it. And I'm scared you're outgrowing me. Alina didn't answer right away. Then she said, maybe I am. It wasn't meant to be cruel. It was just the truth. She stood up, kissed his forehead gently, and added, but I'm not walking away. I'm just walking forward. If you want to meet me there, you'll have to move too. He nodded slowly, not fully understanding, but knowing deep down that she meant it. Later that night, as Alina journaled, she realized something powerful. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Her growth was her answer. Her healing was her victory. And soon, the world would see it too. Alina sat quietly at her desk one morning. Sunlight pouring through the window of her small home office. In front of her glowed an email. The subject line was clear. Offer letter, regional director position. The company was based in Denver. They had seen her speak on that women's panel. Impressed by her leadership style, they invited her to fly out for an interview. That was 3 days ago. Now she had the job. It wasn't just a promotion. It was a leap. A major leadership role in a growing logistics company. A new life in a new city. A fresh start. She had 36 hours to respond. Alina sat back in her chair, letting the weight of it settle in. She glanced around the room. Everything here had memory photos on the shelf, furniture they picked out years ago. Daniel's jacket draped over the armrest. Daniel, he didn't know about the offer yet. Later that evening, she waited until after dinner to tell him. He had just finished rinsing his plate when she said, I need to talk to you. He looked up, casual. What's up? She handed him the printed offer. He scanned the page slowly, then looked back at her, confused. You got a job offer? Out of state. She nodded. Denver. Regional director. It's a huge opportunity. He blinked. Wait, you're actually thinking of taking it? I'm seriously considering it. Yes. There was a long pause. Daniel placed the paper down and sat. What about us? Alina took a breath. I've spent years building a life around someone else's choices. Around comfort, around staying quiet. This is something I earned. Something I want. Face hardened. So you're just going to leave. Throw this all away. I'm not throwing anything away, she said gently. I'm choosing myself. For once, Daniel stood, pacing the room. I thought we were getting better. We're talking more. That's a start. But it doesn't erase the years you weren't really here with me. He shook his head. You didn't even give me a chance to fix it. I gave you years, she said quietly. You just didn't notice. That night, he slept on the couch. Alina didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, knowing the old version of herself would have apologized. She would have pushed the offer aside, told herself love meant sacrifice. But this Alina, she had changed. The next morning, Daniel barely spoke. He left early, slamming the door behind him. Alina sat in the kitchen, stirring her coffee, staring at the clock. She called her sister in Chicago. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" She asked. Her sister replied, "The right thing doesn't always feel comfortable, but it should feel honest. And this sounds honest." By the end of the day, Alina had made her decision. She typed her reply, hit send, and then sat still for a moment. The room was quiet, but inside something roared. She had said yes to the job, to the new life, to the version of herself that had been buried under compromise for too long. When Daniel came home that night, she met him at the door. "I accepted the offer," she said. He looked like he'd expected it, but still, the words hit him hard. "So that's it?" he asked. "No," she said. "It's a beginning, and I'd like to talk about what that means for both of us." They sat on the couch, the air between them thick. "You're just going to move?" he asked again. "I'm not expecting you to follow," she said gently, "but I'm also not asking for permission." He ran a hand through his hair. "Do you even want this marriage anymore?" "I want peace. I want growth. I want partnership, not just presence." He looked at her, finally really looking, eyes heavy. "You've changed." She smiled, not out of pride, but out of truth. "I had to." In the weeks that followed, things shifted further. Alina started preparing for the move. She packed little by little, donated old clothes, and cleaned out drawers that hadn't been touched in years. She didn't rush Daniel, but she didn't wait for him either. One evening, they had dinner together. He was quieter than usual. "I've been thinking," he said. "About everything." She nodded. "Me too. I'm not sure I know how to be the kind of man you need anymore." "That's okay," she replied. "Maybe it's not about who we were. Maybe it's about who we are now and what we still have left." "Do we have anything left?" he asked honestly. "I think we have respect." "That's a start." He looked down. "I should have seen you sooner." She reached across the table and placed her hand on his. "You didn't, but I see myself now, and that's enough." They both knew the truth. They had grown too far apart. And it wasn't hatred or anger that kept them apart now. It was distance born from years of silence. When moving day came, Alina didn't cry. She hugged Daniel at the front door. He held on a second longer than expected. "I hope you find everything you're looking for," Kay said. She pulled back and looked into his eyes. "I already have. I just needed to give myself permission to reach for it." As the moving truck pulled away, Alina sat in her car and looked at the house one last time. Not with regret, but with quiet strength. She drove off toward Denver, not to escape, but to arrive. And somewhere inside, she knew the hardest part wasn't leaving him behind. It was realizing she had already outgrown the version of herself who thought she had to stay. It had been 6 months since Alina moved to Denver. The snow had melted into a crisp spring and the city was buzzing with life. Alina stood by the window of her new office, looking out over the busy streets. Her name was now printed in silver letters on the glass door. Alina Parker, Regional Director. She had worked harder in those few months than she ever had. But not because she was proving herself to anyone. She loved what she did now. Her ideas mattered. Her voice was heard. She was building a team of strong women and men who respected one another. She smiled often, laughed more, and for the first time in a long time, this wasn't just getting through the day, she was truly living it. Alina had also started painting again. In the evenings, after work, she'd head to a small art studio near her apartment. The owner, Leah, quickly became a friend. They'd talk about everything: art, career, heartbreak, and hope. It felt good to be seen, not as someone's wife or someone's assistant, but as herself. Back in Illinois, Daniel had felt her absence in every corner of the house. The silence was heavier than he expected. At first he thought she'd change her mind, that maybe she'd call and say she missed him. But the call never came. Instead, he began to watch her rise quietly. From a distance, her face appeared in an online business magazine. The headline read, "Meet Alina Parker, the woman who walked away and built something bigger." He read every word. Another month passed, and then another. She came back to town briefly for a women's leadership event. Daniel saw a poster with her name on it at a coffee shop. She was standing next to another speaker, smiling brightly, dressed in a sharp navy suit that screamed confidence. That night, he looked at old photos, their wedding vacations, birthdays. She looked younger in those photos, but not necessarily happier, just quieter, like she was always holding back. He remembered all the times she'd tried to talk to him and he didn't really listen. How he'd brushed her off when she needed him most. And now, here she was, thriving. Without him, back in Denver, Alina walked into a packed room for her first keynote speech. The lights were warm and the audience was buzzing. As she stepped up to the podium, she took a deep breath. This wasn't just about career anymore. This was about how far she'd come. I used to believe strength meant staying silent, she began. That love meant giving up parts of myself so someone else could shine. I thought shrinking was the only way to survive in spaces that didn't value me. But I was wrong. The crowd leaned in, every eye on her. Leaving wasn't the hardest part, she continued. Believing I deserved better, that was the real work. But once I did, everything changed. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. She felt sure, grounded, powerful. After the event, people lined up to meet her. A young woman in her 20s said, "I was going to quit my job this week, but hearing you speak, I'm going to stay and fight for what I deserve. Thank you." That moment meant more than any promotion ever had. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Alina looked around at the life she had built. It was simple bookshelves, candles, her favorite tea in the kitchen. But it was hers. No pretending. No shrinking. Just peace. She hadn't dated since moving. Not seriously. A few coffee meets here and there, but nothing lasting. And that was okay. She was still healing. Still learning what it meant to love herself first. One evening, the familiar name popped up on her phone. "Daniel, one new message. Just saw your article. You look happy. I'm proud of you." She stared at the screen for a long time. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she sat with the message. Letting it settle, she thought about the girl she used to be, the one who waited by the phone, hoping for someone else to give her worth. And she thought about the woman she was now, who didn't need validation, only truth. Eventually, she replied, "Thank you. I hope you're doing well too." It was short, kind, complete. There was no bitterness left in her heart. Just clarity. The past had shaped her, but it no longer owned her. Daniel had been part of her story, but he wasn't the ending. Weeks later, she stood in her new home, her paintings on the walls. Her dog curled up on the rug and felt something deep. Something quiet but strong. Not pride, not relief, but wholeness. Alina hadn't just walked away from a marriage. She had walked back to herself, and in doing so, she hadn't just survived betrayal, disappointment, and being overlooked. She had won.